The chandeliers hum like captive stars, while a string quartet slices the air into polished ribbons, and Ethan Harrison laughs. It's an easy, careless sound that ripples through crystal and chrome, turning faces toward Clara Reyes as if arrogance were a spotlight. Ethan's quip lands like a coin tossed from a balcony, and the crowd waits for Clara to scramble. She doesn't. Clara steadies a tray as if it were a compass needle, absorbing the joke without flinching, eyes tracing the windows where the city glitters like 1,000 verdicts. Charles Harrison drifts through donors like a tide that never apologizes, and Victoria Lang watches as if recording a deposition. Isabel skirts the room's edge, the kind of silence that remembers everything. Ethan smirks, asks Clara whether the silver is too heavy for someone unfamiliar with the weight of value. The quartet hits a sour note. Clara replies gently, her voice the kind that leaves echoes in guilty rooms. Laughter thins. Somewhere far below, a siren climbs. Inside, the night holds its breath. The door swings shut on applause that doesn't belong to her, and the corridor's hum returns Clara to gravity. Stainless steel breathes back the quiet. Isabel meets her halfway with the tenderness of someone who has measured storms by the sound of hinges. Clara says she's fine, and the lie floats between them like steam from the dishwashers. Ethan's words replay, fragile bravado trying to sound like power. Clara brushes a raindrop from her sleeve that must have ridden the tray in from the open terrace. Victoria's silhouette passes the porthole window, a metronome of purpose. Clara exhales, places the tray on the counter, and stares at her reflection until the glare dissolves sympathy and memory. Somewhere in the building's bones, music swells again, and she feels the tug of the city she left to become someone the room won't see coming. Ethan steps into night air, only to discover it doesn't flatter him. The city is indifferent, which is another word for honest. He braces on the marble rail and rehearses cleverness he doesn't need, then loses the thread. The rain has thinned to a lace that reminds him of winter, runs with Charles, the man always 2 strides ahead. A door clicks and Victoria joins him without ceremony. She asks if he enjoyed himself, the way a surgeon might ask if a patient slept well. Ethan shrugs and makes a joke that doesn't land. Victoria glances toward the ballroom where Clara has returned to work, as if composure were a language she invented. Victoria says the board reads people more than numbers when the stakes are personal. Ethan swallows. A siren slides by below, rising, then falling, like a warning, rehearsing the shape of consequence. Charles signs one last pledge card, while donors practice the art of exit. The lounge smells faintly of cedar and practiced charm. He pours 2 fingers of something older than most promises, then notices Clara replenishing a fruit bowl that doesn't need it. Their eyes meet. For a heartbeat, the years collapse into a Christmas morning when Clara built towers from coasters, while Isabel ironed uniforms. Charles thanks her with the distance of policy. Clara nods with the economy of someone who knows gratitude can be currency or debt. Ethan slips in a gust of cologne and reconsideration. He asks for a drink he doesn't finish. Silence arrives like a third chair. Charles mentions the board meeting scheduled for next quarter. Clara carries the bowl out as if it holds a verdict, and the door's soft close sounds like a page turning without asking permission. The elevator shudders like a tired confession. Clara and Isabel ride down with crates that used to weigh more when they were younger, and the nights were longer. Isabel breaks the silence to ask whether it hurt. Clara answers that pain isn't the point, memory is. The floor numbers blink, counting down to something that doesn't end at the lobby. From the cage's mesh, the city appears in slivers. A rain street, a yellow cab, a couple arguing kindly under an awning. Clara straightens a clipboard as if aligning longitude. She says goodnights like a promise to return as someone none of them prepared for. The doors open onto concrete and a faint smell of rain and metal. Across the alley, a billboard for Harrison Global smiles its promise into the mist. Clara does not smile back. Glass absorbs the September sun until the whole lobby glows like a decision. Clara Reyes steps through the revolving door with a canvas portfolio that looks more like a boundary than a bag. The receptionist straightens, already briefed by Victoria Lang, and an access badge slides across marble with the quiet of permission. Ethan Harrison emerges from an elevator with the speed of someone who outruns mirrors, stops when he sees Clara, and forgets his cleverness. The lobby's waterfall hushes like a confidant, overhearing a confession. Charles Harrison crosses the mezzanine above, a moving signature, while Victoria descends the stairs with the pace of a verdict that refuses to hurry. Clara thanks the receptionist, clips on the badge, and lifts her chin as if aligning a compass. Ethan starts toward her, rehearsing an apology he has not earned. Clara turns first to Victoria, then to the security gates, and the lobby learns a new etiquette for silence. The boardroom's table stretches like a runway where reputations attempt takeoff. Victoria Lang opens the meeting with a spare introduction that places Clara Reyes beside the numbers instead of beneath them. The screens bloom with charts that don't blink, supply chain audits, charitable disbursements, whistleblower latency. Clara speaks without decoration, every sentence a step that lands. Ethan Harrison sits 2 chairs from Charles Harrison and pretends to read the agenda while listening too hard. The board's faces are C's at different tides. When Clara touches a slide about ethics variance, the room exhales as if remembering a promise. Charles leans back, weighing posture against pressure, and asks whether this level of scrutiny is necessary. Victoria answers that scrutiny is loyalty in practice. Clara's eyes lift just once, meeting Ethan's with the neutral mercy of a traffic light that will not change early. Rows of binders and shared screens turn a quiet conference room into a weather map for consequence. Clara Reyes sits at the head of a temporary table, reviewing vendor ledgers while analysts orbit her like purposeful satellites. Ethan Harrison arrives because Victoria Lang asked him to observe, though the word feels like a reprimand dressed as trust. Clara interviews a department head, questions tuned not to trick but to uncover, and the answers leave faint imprints like footprints drying on time. Ethan waits until the room thins, then approaches with a careful greeting that remembers her name too perfectly. Clara acknowledges him with professional grace, a tone that both spares and instructs. He says he regrets the gala. She says the company's choices will matter more. The fluorescent hum deepens as if the ceiling were listening. An email pings with a spreadsheet that begins changing the shape of the week. The archive smells of toner and the quiet courage of paper. Clara Reyes moves between rolling shelves until the world narrows to signatures and dates that pretend to agree. A foundation ledger sits where it shouldn't, and a series of micro-grants form a breadcrumb path through shell donors. The pattern is elegant enough to be guilty. Victoria Lang joins her, closing the door with a softness that belongs to thresholds. Clara explains what the audit flags hint at: funds migrating like birds to friendly climates, then returning as praise. Victoria's jaw settles. Ethan Harrison appears at the doorway with the awkward timing of someone trying to be useful. Clara shares only what his clearance allows, and the rest stays folded beneath her palm. Dusk drips down the windows like varnish, and somewhere above, the board's future tightens another notch. City night folds itself into a rhythm that steadies Clara Reyes as she exits the building with a phone to her ear. Isabel Reyes fills the line with questions that sound like care disguised as logistics, and Clara answers with the steadiness of someone building a bridge while walking across it. Ethan Harrison catches sight of Clara at the corner and slows, then stops, surrendering to the red hand above the street, as if traffic laws could teach him patience. A bus grumbles by with Harrison Global's slogan peeled across its side like a dare. Clara tells Isabel she's fine, and this time the word carries weight. The signal changes, the crowd leans forward, and Clara moves with them, a single intention inside a many-headed river. Ethan remains on the curb and lets her go. The night keeps a record, the kind that never needs ink. The elevator's hum feels different now, tuned to Clara Rhea's heartbeat instead of the buildings. Beside her, Ethan Harrison pretends to check messages, though the screen reflects only her name in the mirrored wall. The city rises behind glass, a moving painting of consequence. Clara scrolls through compliance findings, her expression unreadable, but her stillness louder than reprimand. Ethan asks if she ever believed in second chances. Clara replies that second chances only count when the first one costs something. The elevator stops 3 floors below the boardroom, and silence becomes its own language. Ethan steps aside, holding the door, his gesture halfway between apology and habit. Clara nods once, precise as punctuation, and walks out. The doors close, taking with them the echo of what he didn't say, and what she no longer needs to hear. The boardroom breathes differently now. Clara stands at the digital display, each slide another layer peeled from a truth the company thought buried under paperwork. Charles Harrison leans forward, knuckles white on polished wood, his empire tightening into silence. Ethan sits at the far end, jaw locked, watching the arithmetic of consequence unfold. Clara's voice is steady, surgical, misdirected charitable funds, overlapping vendor accounts, missing compliance signatures. Victoria Lang interjects just once to clarify that Clara's investigation has board sanction. Charles interrupts, cold and incredulous, demanding who authorized the intrusion. Victoria answers simply, "She did." For a second, the city's light flickers across glass like applause withheld. Clara clicks to the next slide, revealing her final finding, a document signed years ago by Charles himself. The skyline burns copper as evening lowers itself like consequence. Charles Harrison stands before the floor-to-ceiling window, a silhouette that once commanded everything it saw. Ethan enters, words rehearsed, guilt arranged into order, but his father cuts him off with silence. The air between them feels older than blood. Charles says the board will devour weakness if they sense division. Ethan replies that integrity isn't weakness and Clara didn't create the rot, she found it. Charles turns then, his voice a storm, rehearsing thunder. He calls her ungrateful, opportunistic, a servant's daughter overreaching her station. Ethan flinches but doesn't look away. When he finally speaks, it's a single line. Maybe she's the only one still earning what she has. For the first time, Charles says nothing. The skyline behind him trembles with aircraft lights like distant judgment. Clara's apartment is smaller than silence, but brighter than the mansion's memory. Files spread across the kitchen island, the kind of paper that hums with power when truth sleeps under ink. Isabel calls again, voice warm with worry, asking if life is worth the fight. Clara says yes, though she doesn't explain why. On the counter, the framed photo of Isabel in her uniform sits beside Clara's old scholarship acceptance letter, a reminder that the climb never ended, only changed directions. Outside, sirens echo like restless birds. Clara pours coffee instead of wine, the kind of choice that defines endurance. In her inbox, a new message from Victoria waits. Subject line, "Tomorrow. Be ready." Clara leans back, breathes once, and lets the city exhale through the open window. The garage hums like a heart beneath concrete. Ethan waits beside his car, the engine off, headlights cold. Clara steps from the elevator with a folder under her arm and no fear in her stride. For a moment, they just stand there. The son of the empire and the daughter of its shadow. Ethan says he wants to help fix what his father broke. Clara studies him, searching for the first trace of sincerity instead of guilt. She tells him that redemption isn't a favor she can grant. It's something he'll have to build from the ruins himself. Ethan nods, the kind of motion that knows it's starting at zero. Clara turns toward her car, rain beginning to fall in small, decisive drops. Behind her, Ethan opens his phone and deletes a contact, his father's private account. Above them, Thunder rolls like the board's slow applause. Morning brings no calm. The board gathers beneath the chandelier's cold authority, each member armed with printed agendas that already feel obsolete. Clara Reyes stands at the head of the table, flanked by Victoria Lang, who has traded diplomacy for precision. The air tastes like strategy and tension. Ethan Harrison sits quietly, stripped of arrogance, but heavy with knowledge. Charles Harrison enters last, posture still regal, but eyes rimmed in the fatigue of a man sensing erosion beneath marble floors. Clara begins the presentation. Irregularities confirmed, evidence cataloged, audit trails leading back to the executive floor. Each slide lands like a heartbeat, steady, undeniable. Victoria declares an emergency vote to release findings to the board. Charles interrupts, voice cracked with command, warning that exposure will ruin everything his family built. Clara looks directly at him and replies, "Then maybe it's time to rebuild something honest." Sunlight knives across Charles' desk, revealing dust that was once invisible. He sits behind his empire's desk like a monarch in exile, hands gripping an untouched tumbler of scotch. The door opens without warning. Victoria Lang, the one woman he could never intimidate. She places the audit report in front of him and waits. Charles reads the first page, then the next, each line tightening his mouth into a memory of control he no longer has. Victoria reminds him that silence now means complicity, not power. He asks what she expects him to do. Confess? Resign? She tells him the truth, doesn't negotiate. When she leaves, Charles stares at the city until the reflection in the glass no longer looks like his own. The ice in the glass finally cracks, echoing through the office like something breaking, too late to stop. The storm starts without warning, rain strafing the windows as if the sky wants to scrub the city clean. Clara sits at her desk, finalizing the board's ethics disclosure draft, her fingers trembling only when she pauses. Isabel calls, and this time Clara puts her on speaker, the sound of home filling the apartment like soft armor. Isabel asks if she's safe. Clara says she is, though she glances toward her laptop as another email from the press pings in, asking for comment. The world is shifting, and she's both inside and outside its orbit. The rain grows heavier. Thunder rolls like applause from somewhere far away. She looks at the skyline, exhales once, and whispers, "It's time." Somewhere below, the city flickers awake, hungry for what morning will bring. By nightfall, the building's lobby is a cathedral of glass and shadows. Security staff whisper in corners, the kind of silence reserved for news too big to ignore. Ethan waits near the waterfall, hands buried in his coat pockets, watching his father's name reflected backward in the glass. When Clara steps out of the elevator, he straightens but doesn't approach. She looks at him, and for the first time her expression softens, not forgiveness, but understanding. He says the board called an emergency vote. She nods, already knowing the outcome. Behind them, a television muted in the reception area flashes headlines. Harrison Global under internal investigation. The soundless images look almost peaceful, like justice rehearsing how to walk and heal. The board votes under the heavy silence of inevitability. Victoria Lang presides, her voice calm but final. Charles Harrison's seat remains empty, though his nameplate gleams in the reflected city light. Clara presents her concluding report, concise, complete, and devastating. Ethan signs the witness confirmation without hesitation. The vote passes. Harrison Global will announce internal reform, suspension of executive privileges, and full audit release to authorities. The decision echoes against the windows until it sounds like relief. Clara gathers her papers, bows her head slightly, and walks out, leaving power behind her like an unlit chandelier. Victoria watches her go, pride tucked behind professionalism. Ethan remains seated, eyes on his father's empty chair, as if learning what loss really costs. Outside, dawn begins without ceremony. The morning after the vote, Sunlight floods the boardroom as if mercy has taken physical form. Clara Reyes stands before the remaining board members, now fewer but steadier. Victoria Lang begins the session by introducing new measures of transparency, then gestures toward Clara, not as an employee, but as the architect of their future. Charles Harrison's empty chair remains, a monument to power's evaporation. Ethan Harrison listens without interruption, hands clasped, every silence he keeps now deliberate. As the meeting concludes, a courier enters, placing a sealed envelope on the table. Victoria opens it, reads once, and passes it to Clara. It's a notarized confession. Charles Harrison's signature crisp and unflinching beneath the words, "I built an empire of convenience. She built truth." The room holds still. For the first time, Ethan looks proud of something his father wrote. Oh. Charles Harrison sits alone in the penthouse that feels too large for one man. The city moves below him. Taxis, sirens, clouds, 1,000 anonymous stories carrying on without his permission. The confession he wrote sits folded beside the untouched scotch. For the first time, he feels small enough to belong to his own mistakes. Ethan enters quietly, no longer a boy orbiting a storm, but a man facing its eye. He doesn't scold or plead. He simply places a photo of Clara and Isabel on the coffee table, the edges bent with use. Charles studies the image like evidence, then looks at his son, seeing something he never taught him: humility. Ethan says, "You can still make it mean something." Charles nods, once slow and heavy, as if the world finally fits its weight. Weeks later, the same ballroom that once held laughter like a blade now hums with applause born of sincerity. Harrison Global's rebranded foundation launches tonight, dedicating its new chapter to social equity and transparency. Clara Reyes takes the stage beside Victoria Lang, her calm presence commanding more attention than any spotlight. Cameras flash, but no one laughs. Ethan watches from the crowd, dressed in humility and something close to admiration. When Clara speaks, her words aren't sharp or vengeful. They're steady, graceful, gratitude for accountability, for change, for everyone who learned too late how to listen. At the back of the room, Charles Harrison arrives quietly, applause dimming when he enters. He nods once at Clara. She nods back. Not absolution, but peace. The night's air is clean with rain's memory. Clara leans against the terrace railing, skyline glittering below like forgiveness rewritten in light. Ethan approaches, his tone careful, but his eyes honest. He tells her that he's taken a position outside the company, starting over, not to escape but to rebuild something that's his. Clara nods, recognizing sincerity when it finally arrives without performance. She thanks him not for apology but for change. They stand in silence long enough for the wind to decide which direction the story will turn next. Ethan says, "You taught me what real power looks like." Clara replies softly, "Then use it." Somewhere below, thunder hums without anger, just weather turning a page. At dawn, Clara walks alone along the East River Promenade, sneakers instead of heels, coffee instead of armor. The skyline blushes in the soft gold of renewal. Her phone vibrates with a message from Victoria Lang, an offer to join the board permanently. Clara smiles but doesn't answer yet. She watches the sun rise behind the bridge, remembering her mother's words. "We serve until we stand." The reflection of the water trembles like applause from the world itself. Somewhere across the city, Ethan begins his first day outside his father's shadow, and Charles writes his resignation to the shareholders. Clara sips her coffee, turns her collar against the wind, and walks forward, lighter than she's ever been. The cameras flash like lightning, catching sweat and sincerity in equal measure. Charles Harrison faces the press for the first time since the scandal broke. The once unshakable patriarch now reads from a prepared statement, every syllable deliberate, each pause an admission. Clara Reyes watches from the back row beside Victoria Lang, expression unreadable but steady. Ethan stands off to the side, no longer a shield for his father, but a witness to consequence. Charles admits everything: the falsified records, the misplaced trust, the arrogance of assuming his name was its own absolution. When he finishes, no one claps. The silence is a verdict and a mercy. Clara closes her eyes for one heartbeat, hearing her mother's voice whisper somewhere in the quiet. Truth doesn't ruin men. It frees them from pretending. The penthouse feels emptier now, stripped of the staff, the laughter, and the invulnerability. Boxes line the corridor like unspoken regrets. Charles sits at the dining table, once a stage for contracts and celebrations, now cluttered with unopened mail. Ethan pours his father water instead of whiskey, a quiet rebellion disguised as care. They talk, not about the company, but about time, how it spent them both. Charles says the worst thing a man can build is a life too tall for apology to reach. Ethan answers that the height doesn't matter if someone finally starts climbing down. They share a silence heavy enough to be peace. Outside, the skyline burns amber before sinking into night, the empire reduced, but the humanity returning brick by brick. The building is almost empty, save for the hum of machines still believing in morning. Clara Reyes stands alone at her desk, reviewing final transition files for the new ethics division. Her reflection in the darkened glass feels like a stranger she's learned to trust. Ethan appears quietly, holding a signed form, his resignation finalized. He thanks her for what she did, not just for the company, but for him. She nods, her eyes soft but firm. He says he's leaving the city for a while, to start something new, small, honest. She smiles, telling him to send postcards when truth feels heavy again. They share a silence that says everything language can't carry. The elevator chimes and he leaves. The office lights flicker once, as if bowing. Clara returns to where everything began, a modest apartment filled with warmth that money could never buy. Isabella stayed up waiting, the table set with 2 cups of chocolate like a ritual against the world's coldness. They sit, mother and daughter, hands meeting across worn wood. Isabel asks if it's over. Clara answers, not over. Changed. Isabel nods, her eyes wet but smiling, proud in a way that feels older than language. Clara finally allows herself to cry, quietly, as if grief itself were gratitude learning how to breathe. Outside, the street hums with ordinary life, and the sound feels like a song she's finally earned the right to hear. A week later, Victoria Lang convenes the board for the final time under the Harrison name. She announces new leadership, Clara Reyes as Chief Integrity Officer, an appointment met with unanimous approval. The title lands softly, but carries the weight of history reversing itself. Clara stands, humble yet grounded, eyes glancing toward the empty chair, once reserved for the patriarch. She thanks them and outlines a new philosophy: transparency as currency, humility as policy. As she finishes, Victoria rises and offers her a handshake that feels like a coronation. Outside, spring rain begins to fall again, but this time it sounds like applause. The city exhales with the slow confidence of a morning that survived too much. Clara Reyes stands at the rooftop's edge, the wind teasing loose strands of her hair as the first gold light cuts through steel and cloud. The skyline mirrors everything she's fought for. Fractured, imperfect, still shining. Ethan Harrison appears behind her, a silhouette made softer by distance. He tells her he read the new code of ethics, every line, every promise, and it feels like something worth believing in. She smiles, the kind that knows how far silence has carried them. Ethan thanks her not for forgiveness but for clarity. Clara tells him that truth and peace aren't opposites. They're partners in rebuilding. They watch the sunrise together, not as the son of power and the daughter of service, but as 2 people who finally understand value. In the newly renamed Harrison Reyes Foundation Hall, Clara delivers her first address as Chief Integrity Officer. The audience includes employees, journalists, and students, faces that mirror every part of the city. Behind her, banners read "Building Tomorrow with Transparency." Her voice, clear and calm, fills the space with conviction born from surviving exposure without bitterness. She thanks Victoria Lang for courage, Ethan Harrison for accountability, and even Charles Harrison for finally choosing truth over pride. Applause swells not like noise, but like gratitude learning harmony. Victoria wipes at her eye discreetly, pretending to fix her glasses. For once, every word spoken here belongs to everyone equally. A company rebuilt, not by inheritance, but by intention. The garden behind Charles' new townhouse smells of wet earth and surrender. He kneels beside a bed of hydrangeas, trimming them with the same care he once reserved for profit margins. When Clara arrives, he stands slowly, age visible now, not as weakness, but as truth. He thanks her for letting him step down instead of fall. She replies that every fall is just another way to learn gravity. They share a quiet laugh, one that feels more like peace than joy. Charles tells her he's donating the penthouse, proceeds to fund scholarships for underprivileged employees' children. Clara nods, unable to speak for a moment. He extends his hand, she takes it. Somewhere between their palms, 20 years of distance finally collapses into respect. Dusk paints the city in tones of closure. A company dinner celebrates the official relaunch, though laughter tonight feels earned, not performed. Clara and Victoria sit side by side, watching employees mingle. Once strangers divided by class, now equals bound by ambition and honesty. Victoria raises a glass to Clara, saying softly, "You made them remember why this place matters." Clara replies, "We all did." Across the terrace, Ethan catches her eye, lifts his glass in salute, and for the first time, gesture feels mutual, balanced, and unburdened. Music hums low. Conversation flows like warm light through glass. Above them, the first stars appear, not as witnesses, but as participants in something repaired. The night belongs to the city again. Clara walks along the river where she once stood alone at dawn. Only this time, the water doesn't look like reflection. It looks like direction. The skyline glows, rebuilt, yet familiar. Behind her, Isabel joins, her arm looped gently through her daughter's. They talk about ordinary things, groceries, the weather, life outside of headlines. Clara stops, looks at her mother, and thanks her for never letting her forget who she was before all this. Isabel smiles, eyes shining. They stand in silence, listening to the water. Somewhere across the city, Ethan looks out his own new office window, and Charles waters his plants by moonlight. The world keeps turning, no longer above them, but with them.